Hello, everyone. This is Leon Morales with DNA Behavior. Welcome to our DNA Behavior API webinar. I've got Ryan Scott here as well, our Chief Technology Officer, and we're going to spend about the next 30 to 40 minutes talking about sort of our API process, having that competitive edge using API for our technology. So with that, I want to just introduce both of us. My name is Leon Morales. My title is Managing Director, also Chief Relationship Officer at the company. And I've been with the company since 2012, and I have such an interest in human behavior. That's really what drew me to the company. And sort of my passion really around unlocking the power of human behavior. And over the last 18 months, the company has really transformed into sort of this API sort of enabled technology. So we work with partners all over the world, sort of building platforms. We also have a retail version of what we do for financial DNA, business DNA, and communication DNA. We have advisors and client organizations that work with us, again, around the world. But I think our real interest here is that we've really enjoyed working on it with different partners building sort of their behavioral platforms. So it's been pretty exciting. I'll let Ryan introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you, Leon. So my name is Ryan Scott. I lead the technology and innovation at DNA. I've been with the companies for around 10 years now, and I help firms integrate specifically our API into their applications. So if a particular company has an initiative and they believe that behavior can help solve some problems or give them a competitive edge, they'll reach out to us, and then oftentimes they'll leverage our API in order to build our insights into their system.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. So just a little housekeeping items. We actually occasionally are able to open up the Q&A. We're not going to be able to do that. We're having a little bit of internet issues. So because Ryan and I are in different locations, but we do have the option for you to ask in the Q&A section. If you wouldn't mind just asking your question, we're going to take a pause midway through, just to do a pulse check, ask any questions that you have, and between Ryan and I think we can answer those for you. For the agenda today, we really wanted to cover just the history of the company, how we got to where we are, and a little bit around sort of the behavioral science of what we do. And then we have 3 case studies that we wanted to present to the group. And these case studies really were positioned because we have a number of companies that work with us building these behavioral insights. And we thought these 3 examples would be great around increasing revenue, employee productivity, and then team productivity. So, and then we've got a couple of sort of facts and sort of stats that we can share with you. And then if anybody has any questions after this, we will make sure that we, engage with you. Or if you want to have a call with either me or Lisa Travis, she actually does our relationship sales as well. We'll make ourselves available. We also will make this presentation available at the end of the webinar. It'll be probably later this afternoon, along with a PDF version of this presentation. With that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So who are we as a business? DNA Behavior has been around since 2001. We started out as a intergenerational wealth transfer company, consulting company. Our CEO, Hugh Massey, worked as a financial advisor, and he really had sort of this instinct around human behavior, how people work together. We grew up to be a technology company. And then I mentioned earlier that we have sort of the retail version of what we use for financial DNA, business DNA, and communication DNA. And the problem we really solve here is, and all of us probably have some knowledge of this, our intensified behaviors, like when we're under stress, we will react probably differently than we would, sort of absent sort of stress. And that's what we call our level 1 behavior. And I'll get into that a little bit later in the slides, but it really can damage relationships, or it can really stint sort of the ability to do anything because you're sort of caught up in this intensified behavior. And if you have a relationship, your husband, your wife, or a business relationship, you can do a lot of damage under this stress. So what we do well is really being able to identify those human differences around money attitudes, pressure, emotions that derail performance. And then that quote that we really like to use is that 87% of issues really are communication related, and that's related to that Harvard Business Review back in 2002. So who are we? We consider ourselves an omni-channel business behavior platform, and I mentioned that we have the three sort of solutions called financial DNA, business DNA, and communication DNA. And we've spent the last really 8 or 9 years really deploying a very world-class one cloud behavior-based platform. It's sort of the engine behind everything that we do, all the algorithms, everything that we do. And inside of this, the things that we've really uncovered over the last 18 months is that companies really want three things as they want behavior sort of easy to implement. One is they want it to be scalable. They also want behavioral insights to be embedded into their platform. They're not looking to actually go out and pull PDF reports. They really want to integrate it in with their own data. And they want it to be easy to use for the employees, that there's not a lot of change management sort of aspects to it. And our methodology around this is know, engage, and grow every employee, advisor, and client relationship. Know being, if you know yourself at a pretty deep level, you can perform better, sort of engaging with people that you work with, whether it's recruiting or onboarding, for that employee. We find that, when you do spend time onboarding, an individual, the longevity of that employee is much greater. And then for your client advisor relationships, making sure that you actually have sort of the right relationship that you're working with, or a team member that's supporting that client. And those three products, or those three solutions, are really part of that whole behavioral platform. Okay, and I mentioned, unmanaged behavior, sort of, if you look at this iceberg slide, we call it, this iceberg slide really depicts what we call our level 1 and level 2 behavior. And if any of you have studied Daniel Kahneman's work on thinking fast and slow, and I'm sure many of you have, it really shows that, and he uses a reference of level 1 and level 2 in thinking fast and slow. But this is really what the core of what our natural behavior questionnaire is. It uncovers those automatic behavioral biases, those learning styles, those things that we do that are largely unconscious. We just do it because that's what we do. And then above the waterline, or above the surface, are what we call learned behaviors. And we all have an element of both. But the theory is that 95% of our behavior is really that iceberg slide underneath, because that's how we operate. That's what makes it successful. And sort of, if you don't really know it, sometimes people go through their life not even really knowing what their natural talents are. That's what you can uncover with financial DNA and business DNA, are those very natural and instinctive behaviors. And then the things that we do, society norms, the things that we do sort of in our education, our relationships, are all what we call learned behaviors. And they work very closely together, but under pressure, we really do go to those natural and instinctive behaviors. So if you ever had sort of a squabble with your spouse, usually you sort of revert back to that natural behavior, and they do as well. And you can really have an impasse. You can have sort of, struggles with that. We work with a number of financial advisors, and we never consider ourselves to be marital counselors by any means. But sometimes when they see these two profiles next to each other, they really understand why they have these differences. And it really relates to that natural and instinctive behavior. So if anybody's interested in a little more of the science, I'm happy to share that or discuss that with you. But that serves as the basis of what we do in our API world. And I'm going to turn it over to Ryan.
Yeah, so now I'm going to describe how we actually uncover the natural behavior that Leon was just describing. So here we have an example of how we can embed the API from our system into yours, into your application. So you see here on the left-hand side, this is an example of a questionnaire that's embedded into an iPhone app. So an employer or client logs into the firm's online platform. So that could be an app that you're developing, the questionnaire that's ours can be embedded directly into there so that your participant can log directly into that questionnaire and go through the whole DNA experience. On your system side, you'll store all the answers, and then it's a pretty simple process. It's a very simple API integration that we have. Your system simply just imports the data into our system. We score the profile, as we call it, or we determine all the behavioral insights. There's about 200 different attributes that we can pick up for a particular participant, and then we'll send them back to you as soon as they're ready. So that whole interaction happens in a fraction of a second. It's very simple. And immediately those behavioral insights are available for you to use within your own application. And over here on the right, we have an example of how that can be displayed on your system. So if you want to have, a risk questionnaire, or if you want to identify how individuals can work together from a relationship perspective, whether it's employees working with clients or two people working together, we have a few firms that are interested in even dating apps. All that can be picked up on using behavior. So you can show the results up on the screen. And again, we have about 200 different attributes, and we can predict virtually every single human habit, whether it's an investing habit, a work habit, or a decision-making habit. We would have something that can work along with that. So I'm going to give you a few examples on how this actually works in our system, and then we're going to go into some specific use cases. So here we have an overview of the story of why. So when we first start the discovery process, as we call it, or the questionnaire, we make sure that a particular individual understands and knows why they're actually taking it. So this isn't just another questionnaire that you're just taking, that somebody sends you a link for. When you complete a DNA discovery, you are just completing this once in your life, and it can be reused, whether it's in a business scenario or a financial planning scenario, or working with a life coach, or whatever you can repurpose that information. So it's important that a person knows they just have to take this process one time. It takes only 10 minutes to complete, and the results last a lifetime. So this is what the actual questionnaire looks like. Again, we measure virtually every single human habit, and the results do last a lifetime. The users just select one most like and one least like on each screen, and they can quickly move on. Each question should be completed in less than 10 seconds. And the results, this is just a bigger example of what the results screen could look like. This is our standard results screen that will be coming live to our retail customers soon in the next few months. But we work with our API partners and people that are developing apps in order to build these experiences on their system. So we're going to pause right here before we get into the specific use cases that we have prepared, and just see if any of you have any questions before we move on.
And Ryan, there are no questions in the chat box at this point.
Okay, so I guess we will go ahead and move on. If anybody has any questions, just feel free. There's a raise your hand function and also a Q&A function that's in the chat box. Just feel free to connect with us that way, and we can pause and just answer your question. So we have some specific use cases to cover. So this one is one that we're quite excited about, and this displays our full work end to end and what we're capable of doing. This particular company is an Australian bank, and this is our digital advice use case. So this particular firm, they had 5,400 advisors, and their strength is providing one-on-one, face-to-face, goals-based financial planning. They wanted to bring that strength that they had from a face-to-face perspective and make it more of a digital experience that it can be consistent to each and every client. So all the pictures that you'll see in here are actually the real integration that we did with them. This is not, some stock photos that we actually pulled. So if you can see here, there's two individuals that are interfacing with a digital desk, and that is a center point of this whole engagement. It's an engagement where it's a if you will, face-to-face and also digital. So the advisor is working with the client in the office to prepare a digital goals-based planning system. So there's three different phases of this firm's process. They have an explore phase, a plan phase, and a track phase. So in the explore phase, on the client's complete financial DNA. So we have, leveraging the API that we offer, the clients can go into this custom application and complete financial DNA. And then this particular firm charges $350 for the client fee in order to complete this goals review, which is, DNA is a big component of. In addition to completing financial DNA, the client completes a goals-based assessment that we help this firm custom build. Then after that is the plan phase. So the client will go through and prioritize and submit goals. And then in the track phase is more of the ongoing relationship between the client and the advisor. And they'll come into the advisor practice. And then there's a sophisticated goals model where they can run all the different goals that are financial related through their financial DNA, and also the requirements that a client may have in order to meet their goals for retirement and spending. And they help align all that. So DNA is fully embedded in that whole process. And this is a multi-stage process in how this actually works. So here on day one, the client would meet with a concierge. So they're not actually meeting with the particular advisor. The concierge would then invite the client to complete the process in a portal. Then this is the key part, is that the client is then matched to a suited advisor. So they built this particular process and workflow knowing that individuals, if they're paired up to work together from a DNA perspective, are more efficient. And this is really one of the core pieces of how they've been so competitive with this particular integration, is that there's a piece of study that is, if a particular client is matched to the right advisor, they're going to be 40% more efficient by working together. So on the 5th day, the advisor meets with the client face-to-face. So previous to the 5th day, it was all digital. And then the advisor walks the client through the goals process. The advisor presents the client with their portfolio. And we have various tools for comparison reports and dashboards that can be used for couples so that everybody can understand their own styles. Then, because we have so much data and metrics on a particular individual, compliance departments typically like that in a financial services setting. So they're able to monitor client interactions with portfolio risk, know your client compliance and suitability. If you're familiar in financial services, you should know all those specific aspects. And if you're not familiar with financial services, essentially we can just pick up and predict the way that people would act in certain scenarios. And being able to do that helps firms limit legal risk in particular scenarios. And that's what that's used for in financial services. We have a few real-time tools to predict how someone would behave in real-time environments, and those are used in this particular scenario. They use a tool called Market Mood. And then periodically, the DNA process is brought back up between the advisor and their client so that they can review the goals. And this just describes the impact that we're able to make. So this particular client right now is seeing a ROI of it's a tremendous ROI actually, is 1,400% based on all the additional advice fees that they're charging and the added value that DNA has brought. We've seen with this particular one, because they make it a requirement, they've had great participation. So the advisors and the clients both have 100% participation. And that's simply because DNA is a requirement in order for you to participate in this process. So it's not a choice. It's just that you are following the standard process whenever you're being onboarded. And DNA is embedded and ingrained into that process, since it is a requirement to match you up with a behaviorally suited advisor. We've rolled this particular process out to 32 different advice practices. And we found out some very interesting things from a DNA perspective. So in the bottom 2 boxes on the right, you can see that from a client financial DNA perspective, they're extremely conservative. So the average client risk score is a 36. So that particularly means that someone is not going to want to take a lot of risk in the stock market. They're going to want to have a lot of securities whenever it comes to investments. So, less stocks and more in bonds or even in bank account in some scenarios. We had some clients that are a group one, which is essentially just capital protection. The advisors, on the other hand, are more balanced. So their average risk score is a 49. We actually had a advisor that is in this group that had a risk score of a 97. So you are matching up relatively conservative client base with pretty risk-taking advisors that presented some challenges for them because they realized that maybe the communication that they were giving the clients was a mismatch. There's clearly a compliance issue that needs to be reviewed. Are the advisors actually making recommendations that would be appropriate for themselves but not the client? And then lastly, from a marketing perspective, the clients actually, their preferred method of marketing was quick phone calls and follow-up emails. And the advisors actually preferred to meet in person, and then they like all the networking events and some of the glitz and glamour that they get to provide as a marketing service. They were actually able to rejig some of their marketing spend more appropriately for their client base, for this particular group that they're working with. So what we found is that whenever you look at a whole company and all the services that they offer, typically services within one business unit will be matched up to a particular client type. So this one is more geared towards manufacturing facilities and retirement accounts that have a less than $500,000 it currently invested in them. So they're working with specific client types, and we see some trends between demographics and also the DNA styles of those individuals, and that kind of shines out there as well. And lastly, before we go into the next use case, because that one actually does pertain to a partner and some of the work that they provided, we wanted to highlight our ecosystem. So DNA Behavior, the core of our brand is the profiling engine, if you will. So we're able to score and provide behavioral insights through 3 different main channels: communication DNA, financial DNA, and business DNA. So through that, we have many alliances, business integrators, DNA accelerators, incubator API partners, and enterprise API partners. And through the work that we do and working with all these different partners, we're able to leverage some of our insights to make a bigger impact. So Leon now is going to go over our next use case, which is about hotel chain management and how they were able to work with one of our partners in order to earn their competitive advantage.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. So as everyone on the call recognized, Ryan really went through the whole financial services, sort of end-to-end around that whole client advisor matching. So that was a really fun program that he and I both worked on. The next one I worked on with Ryan, he helped sort of with the benchmarking. We had a client that had 27 hotels, and they had 3 levels in their organization. They had a general manager, an assistant manager, and a sales manager. And they were really perplexed because they had some of the stores, even though the training was exactly the same for all of the hotels, it was very standardized. They were seeing mixed results in some of these hotels. So they came to us and asked, we really want to be able to use this and be able to integrate the information so we can make better hiring decisions. And then when we do have coaching opportunities, we have the right information to be able to work with these folks, especially at the senior level, because they had a high impact on the results of the organization. So the total organization had 1,450 people. They had a corporate headquarters. They were disparate. They actually were not even a unified hotel chain. They had different brands. So they were really trying to understand, how do we make these hotels run more efficiently? So that was the problem area that we went into. So we worked on the assignment. The objective was really to understand, how do we work with the group, and everybody in the group completed the business DNA questionnaire, which is the same 46 questionnaire that Ryan mentioned earlier. Everyone went through that, and it was really intended to be sort of an all-encompassing sort of engagement with the leadership, including the corporate headquarters. And we built a benchmark based on sort of low, medium, and high performers. And we identified through the senior leadership those leaders at the corporate headquarters of those top performers and what they consider to be the bottom performers. And we went through several iterations of that to really fine tune sort of the high performers and the low performers. And we really, through the data, we really understood why they were bottom performers. In their hiring process, they really were hiring people, they were promoting people from the assistant general manager to general manager, and they really did not have the behavioral fit. So there were some things that they really needed to do in their hiring practices for each one of those roles. It was quite honestly a very different benchmark for all three roles. So it was quite eye-opening for their chief of HR and their operations leaders, their two general managers or operational leaders, VPs. So they went through this exercise and built their hiring practices based on sort of these benchmarks. And what they ended up doing is integrating it to the entire hotels, even down to the housekeepers, to the, at every level of the organization. And sort of the benefit that they had is they definitely saw, a 40% individual productivity for the general managers, assistants, and sales managers because they were in the right roles, doing the right type of work. They also saw a huge reduction in internal emails because people were not getting confused. They knew how to communicate to each one of those, so they really used some very simple techniques to be able to work with those individuals. They also helped understand sort of the recruiting process on, promotions, right people for right roles, and they built incentive plans based on that. So overall, through that engagement, they saw a savings of $1 million, just with this project. So it was quite impactful, and they continued to be a client of ours, and we continue to innovate sort of that hiring process and the onboarding process with them. So it was a great exercise to work with that chain. And if anybody has any questions on that, please feel free to put those in the chat box, and we'll answer those.
Doesn't look like we have any questions yet, Leon. So now that you've gone over the individual productivity and what we can do whenever we work with individuals on their own strengths and create benchmarks on that, you can now explain how we can do that on a grander level whenever we work with many people, and then we can achieve team productivity with many times over.
All right, excellent. So this is also an engagement I worked on with a couple of our consultants. And it was a university that they had hired a new CFO for the organization. And that person's responsibility, she actually was coming in and really evaluating each one of the groups. And they had just finished an Oracle upgrade. And if anybody's actually been through a large ERP sort of implementation, it can be pretty difficult to get through that. But, they actually came through that, emerged, and they had this team, a very technical team, that was really responsible for taking the Oracle upgrade and providing deliverables that were much more meaningful data to help the organization run better, senior leadership getting data that would help them run the university better. Well, as the CFO was gathering information, she found this group of 30 of technical and functional business folks that were building, sort of databases of information that really was not optimal. Quite honestly, it was quite dysfunctional. And in her analysis, the 30 people really needed to be let go. And that was pretty alarming because this particular university wasn't in the practice of letting large number of people go. That just wasn't their operating sort of model. And not that you want to carry people that are not effective, but she was really of the opinion, we've spent, millions of dollars on this Oracle system. Now we're not getting any data. And truly, there were no deliverables in the last 90 days. When she started, they hadn't had any deliverables, to any meaningful deliverables. So the senior leader that actually worked for the CFO really was, quite a driver herself, but she really wanted to at least give the opportunity for everybody to prove themselves that they could really do this type of work. So they engaged with DNA Behavior to do sort of an engagement with them using sort of the data to be able to make better decisions and really understand each of these individuals better. So And the 70% team productivity that you see here on the screen, I can tell you it's probably upwards of that. But what happened is each person completed the questionnaire, the business DNA questionnaire. They met with the consultant and spent time with them, probably 45 minutes to an hour. It really uncovered some interesting things. What we actually did, in the consultant and the couple consultants and I worked together, we really understood that it wasn't necessarily that people didn't know their jobs. They just were either not doing the right types of work, or there were a lot of communication gaps that were not being sort of addressed. So people were just throwing things over the wall. You know, I sent an email, they really were not communicating. So overall, that, you know, doing that one-on-one review exposed a lot of things that helped the team become better aware of how they could work better together. So this is a project that lasted about 90 days. And at the end of the 90 days, they actually came together in this capstone sort of review with the CFO there. And I can attest, because I was actually there from the beginning. You know, the CFO, who literally wanted to let all 30 people go, recognized that there was such strength with these group. Out of the 7 teams that were there, they started delivering things pretty quickly. So they started understanding what their charter was, why they were doing what they were doing, who their stakeholders were. You know, they also helped identify these benchmarks that people were just not doing the right activities through this. And we really, through the consultants, were able to identify that they didn't really need different people. What they needed was a little bit better structure around the process. So it really helped individuals understand how they were part of the larger organization. And through all of this, there was one individual that was sort of a mismatch on the team, and I think he probably could have stayed with the team, but he self-selected to go to another part of the organization that was doing different project work. And it was done in probably one of the most respectful ways I've ever seen. It really let the CFO and the leader just how effective this turnaround was within 90 days. And I was there at the capstone business review with the CFO, and I can tell you she was really amazed that this had sort of had the deliverables and the glowing reviews of every team member that was there, and just the mutual respect that it had. So it was really amazing turnaround. And I worked with this university for a number of years, and they used a different assessment tool to be able to do this. It was sort of the need to understand how each person sort of fit into the organization that made the difference. But on an ongoing basis, they had a $6 million savings to the university. First of all, they had no attrition from that project, and they started actually having deliverables that were part of, just the ongoing sort of work that they did. They had 3 times the project efficiency. They were working better together. So it was definitely one of those projects that, you know, you leave and you know you've done a great job and you've been asked to come back. So they've really instituted sort of the whole DNA, the business DNA process as part of their onboarding. They don't use it within hiring because that's not one of the things that they do, but for team onboarding and sort of work that they do, they've been using that now for the last 4 years. Are there any questions on that? I don't see any in the checkbox. Okay. Now we're going to, so those give you an example of a financial DNA implementation and then 2 business DNA real life examples that we have. Now we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about our DNA API, powering your own application. And we'll turn it over to Ryan.
If you have an application or an idea of an application and you want to, use behavioral insights in order to solve problems and build a competitive edge, there's some easier ways that you can just get started. So some of the examples that we gave you are pretty big examples and bigger installs, but there are just some simple little steps you can do in order to get started. So we have 2 different ways that you can start working with us. We have an enterprise API if you have a larger firm and more developers and require a little bit more resources in order to get started. And then we also have an incubator API. So incubator API is centered more towards startup firms and firms that are really just trying to get their feet wet and build a new innovative app. And they have more of a startup small team structure. So either way, regardless of where you want to go, we have a minimal viable product laid out for you. So this is basically the minimal thing that you need to do in order to get up and running. with our API. So to get started, we have a questionnaire integration that you can do. So if you're, you know, on the financial DNA side or in the financial services industry, the questionnaire typically will be embedded into an application from the client end. So in a client portal or through email, you know, if you want to send them an email and have them complete the discovery that way. If you're building an employee HR tool, you know, it would be something that the employees actually would log in and complete on their portal or in an app. So be thinking about where you want that questionnaire to sit, and then you can access our API in order to get that questionnaire and get started. And then there are quick little simple get started packs that we have for our API that will help you get started with whatever kind of habits that you want to pick up on from a behavioral insights perspective. So we have some packs of API insights that are work habits. We have investing habits. We just released a new one as sales habits. So if you have an idea of how you can build a sales app, or they can identify if someone's an inside or outside sales rep, are they a hunter or a lead gatherer. We have other really cool insights that we can do from a sales perspective side. And then we also have hundreds of insights around decision making. So how big are you at you know, setting goals, or how likely are you to chase after the goal? Very specific things like that. So if you're interested in any of that, yeah, just feel free to reach out to us. And it's just for participating in the webinar today, we will be giving you all a behavioral insight guide so that you can access all of the insights that we have and see for yourself how they're specifically used. That will help you out in choosing what results APIs would be interesting for the application that you're thinking of. And then we also allow our API partners to access our library of PDF reports. So whenever someone completes a process, we have about 50 different reports that could be provided to a participant after the fact. So you can hunt through all the different reports that we have. Many of them can be co-branded. So you can put your logo and your look and feel on the particular report to make it your own. And then that report can be provided to the API, or you can store it in your application that way. So after that, is there any questions?
Ryan, we've had 3 questions. Probably the biggest one was, it looked like we were geared towards sort of large companies, but could they take it themselves? And I pointed them to, you can go to either financialdna.com or businessdna.com, and there's a trial process there where you can go through that questionnaire yourself and receive either a financial behavior report or a work talent report as part of that. And then at the end of this, we will send the recording and the presentation, and then Lisa Travis will follow up with anyone that would like to have a meeting. We'll be happy to talk with you a little bit at length of what you're trying to build. And that was really the only other question.
Great. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and flash up our contact us information. So if you want to get in touch with us, again, you can reach out to a team member, or here's all of our contact information as well.
Really appreciate everybody's participation today, and hopefully you'll attend another webinar. Ryan and I, or Nikki, try to host these one a month. We've been sort of hearing some different feedback, so we try to gear those webinars for relevant information, but that's very API related. So we do appreciate your participation today, and you will get the call recording later this afternoon. Thank you.